Vaughan, thank you for talking to us.
Thank
Before
you.
I ask you about the events of the 24th of June 1978, that evening, can you tell us a bit about your involvement in LGBTQI politics?
Well, I've always thought that my earliest involvement was when I was 6 years old, because from about that stage I was struggling with questions of identity, and most particularly the probability that I was gay, though that wasn't a word that was then used. But more practically, I guess my wife, have been married. I have children and grandchildren. Though I've lived with my gay partner now for about 36 years. My wife was in the 70s studying at Macquarie University. We lived in Sydney, and one day she came home and said that the next day she was going to a demonstration in favour of a gay student, Jeremy Fisher, who'd been expelled from one of the university colleges. And that just absolutely floored me, because the next day off she went to a demonstration in favour of a gay who was being discriminated against in a major way. And while in the 70s I was alert to all of the changes that were taking place, that sort of was the one that sort of knocked my head around and made me say, well, my wife's going, but I'm not game to go, as well as I'm not going.
What sort of year would that have been?
Pretty wild guess. Early 70s, I think.
And did you join any of the gay liberation groups?
Eventually, I subsequently became a mature age student at Macquarie University, and immediately, and I will again emphasise that I was very scared, joined the Macquarie University Students' Gay Group, which proved quite influential again, because while it engaged mainly in social events, it was deeply committed, and the social events really set up networks of people and new friends, and so one began to become incorporated into a body of gay friends, rather than just picking up a guy.
And this would
briefly
have been around 1976?
No, 76 or 77, yes, probably 76 actually.
And you'd also been involved with some of the events of 1978. Can you tell us a bit about that?
While I was at Macquarie University, but then working for the ABC, I joined the, what was it called, Socialist Homosexuals, or National Socialist Homosexual Network, something like that met in Glebe, where I'd met many of the principal activists around gay issues: Lance Gowland, Dr. Jim Walker, Peter Murphy, Craig Johnson, and it's a big longer list, but these people were hugely committed. I wanted to be committed, but didn't have much of the courage to do so. So I did allow my home phone number to go on all homosexual socialist publications, in spite of the fact that if anybody rang up, they'd probably get my wife. But,
did your wife know all about this?
At this stage, for about 5 years, we tried to continue our marriage, knowing that I was gay and sometimes got off with men, and in the end, I I was the one who couldn't sort of really cope with it. I felt that it was the false part, had become the false part of my life, and broke it.
And you'd been working at the ABC.
Yes.
You were in the media. I mean, the
Yes.
media is often seen as quite gay-friendly these days, to an extent.
Yes.
Back then, what was it like?
It was gay-friendly, but mostly undeclared gay. No, I'd worked with the ABC from the 1960s. It was a film of me at the age of about 25, I think, doing interviews, and well, certainly way back then, there might have been a lot of gays there, but it didn't behave in a gay-friendly way. It's hard to, the whole business about the ABC and gays is it needs a lot more thought than has been given to it, I think, because while it's rather like saying, well, yes, gays are attracted to showbiz for the glitter, but then that's not necessarily so. A lot of the gays there are involved in carpentry, you know, making sets or stuff. And a lot of it sort of undeclared. So I'm not sure it was such an outish place as people like to think.
On the 24th of June 1978, before the evening parade, which became the precursor of today's Mardi Gras, we all know and love, well, some of us love, had you been involved with the morning protest or the
Yes,
event?
I had.
And do you remember much about that morning protest?
Oh, not a great deal. I'll just sort of emphasise that while I was doing all these things, that is becoming involved in gay politics, I was, and probably still am, such a middle-class bourgeois consciousness that I did them all often consumed by fear. It took huge courage on my part to sort of take part in anything of that nature. I mean, I'd easily taken part in Vietnam War protests, goodness knows what else, women's protests and stuff. But gay, I was almost catatonic at the idea that I was being looked on and people could identify me as gay. Regarding the thing, I remember the morning protest, and I simply, I marched down, I can remember marching down George Street, and a lot of, I can remember lots and lots of middle-aged women shoppers on the footpaths, some waving, but many looking daggers, absolute daggers, disgust.
How did you feel when they would give you daggers?
I was still scared. I still felt deeply scared.
And your reasons for being scared, was that because you didn't feel comfortable with your sexuality?
That's right.
Was that it wasn't because you worked at the ABC?
No, I was just scared of my sexuality. And scared of being identified as gay, even though I would be prepared to hold up a sign, but it wasn't. It was in my heart, but there was some part of me, a mental construct part really, that sort of said, you might be doing this, but it's wrong.
And did you hold a sign?
Yes.
Do you remember what
No, I
said?
don't.
Do you remember anything? Were there any chantings going on?
Oh yes, there were certainly chantings, but the conventional ones, I don't know that I can even remember them exactly. Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, and I'm very old.
Were there many police at that morning protest?
My recollection is that there were a fair number of police, but not in any intimidating role, except that police, particularly in those days, were always intimidating. Their presence was intimidating because you didn't know what they might do, and they had a poor reputation for the way they dealt with protests on other issues.
Do you remember the route of that march?
Not really. I would have. This is a wild guess. I thought that it went from about Town Hall, but it might have been somewhere else down George Street and turned up into Martin Place. That's what I. So it could have been Castlereagh Street.
Definitely went down George Street.
That's what my recollection is, but my recollection is more of the of those people on the sidewalks.
Did you go to the events at Paddington Town Hall?
I did. Yes, in the afternoon, and I'm not sure whether I actually attended events or went there and sort of chatted with some gay friends or just to see what was going on.
What was it exactly? Was it lectures?
It was lectures and forums. And yes. That's my recollection of it.
So on to the evening parade.
Yes, sure.
Why was that date chosen? Was there a significance?
No idea.
And what made you go to all three events?
Well, my personal commitment to come out, even though other people might have thought I was out, I knew that I wasn't, and I knew that I had big issues to deal with, and I thought the way to do it is to get more and more involved, and there were secondary motives on all that. I was obsessively in love with Peter Murphy, and so some of it would have been trailing around, having to bump into Peter. Those things do play a part in this, but it'd be. I'm sure I'm not making it up when I say it wasn't only that. So I don't know why it was chosen in that way.
You weren't one of the organisers, were you?
I wasn't involved in any way with the organiser. Yeah.
Were you aware of people like Ron Austin behind the scenes, or?
No, I didn't. I didn't know Ron. I didn't know my present partner Kym, who is in many of the photos of that first parade. But no, I knew people such as those I've mentioned.
Yes.
From Macquarie, and others whose names they're not sitting on the top of my head. But so my intention was, at night I will feel more comfortable in myself than I had in the morning. I remember thinking that.
And did you?
I think I did.
And did you go to the evening parade on your own or with friends?
I did go on my own, hoping that when we got down to Hyde Park, I'd find Peter Murphy and some friends, and we'd all go off and have a nice, have a couple of drinks, and I might end up spending the night with Peter. That was what I thought was going to happen.
So you got to Taylor Square. It would have been around 10 p.m. at night?
Yes, it was quite late.
Do you remember the atmosphere?
Yes, I remember people being very joyous, up, while the organisers and the leaders understood it as a political gesture. My feeling was that people thought this is just going to be a fun thing to do, and yes, I suppose that people would thought. I can remember talking with a couple of people that I vaguely knew, probably didn't even know their names, and just chatting, and they just thought this was going to be great fun, and they had on a bit of makeup, not feminine makeup,
foundation,
and were doing something with hats or that might.
So it was a fun atmosphere.
That was my experience of it, and I would have been well in the crowd or well down towards the back by the time started.
Do you remember any sorts of numbers
At
at the beginning?
Yes. I would have thought 800 might have been the max at the beginning. Yeah, and it would have grown a bit.
Were there many trucks or floats that you remember?
No, I don't. I remember lads at the lead, and I don't remember other floats, though. There probably were other trucks.
Was any music playing from Lance's truck?
Yes.
Do you remember any of the tracks?
No.
So the parade went down Oxford. Did it go down Oxford Street?
Yes, we went down Oxford Street, and it might have been that these are all wild guesses. I would have thought that maybe as many as 50 people came out of the bars and pubs.
What were people chanting?
Oh, out of the bars and into the streets was the big one, because the march down Oxford Street was designed to achieve just that.
And when the people came out of the bars, had people actually gone in the bars to get them out, or did they just?
No, some people went in and said, "Come on, join us. Come on, this is fun. Come on, join us." And some people did, that way.
And at that time of the parade going down Oxford Street, were there many police at that point?
No, I have no remembrance of any police. There must have been police, but I have no recollection of any police until we got to Hyde Park. And remember, I was well back in the parade.
So you went down to Hyde Park. That's
Yes.
when you first remember the police.
Yes.
At what point did trouble begin?
Well, from where I was, trouble didn't begin, because it was all happened. All this had happened up the front, but what had happened, nobody knew. Or way back in the parade, one didn't know. And so instead of going into Hyde Park, we were going down along College Street, and we were just following. There was word that there'd been some sort of stoush, but this is where the police wanted us to go, was what we were told, or what the sort of rumour was. But when I say we were told, there wasn't anybody to tell me, and so it was all just sort of gossip and we'll go down here.
So there was a grapevine, almost like Chinese whispers coming back.
Yes.
But you couldn't see Lance or the truck from where you were.
No.
So you got to College Street.
Yes.
So you didn't go into Hyde Park.
No.
You went to College Street, then you went to William Street.
Yes.
And what was the atmosphere like there?
Well, by this is again, I've no idea whether my recollection is correct, but when we got to William Street, the night was increasingly filled with police car sirens, and there were police vehicles with flashing lights at William Street, and that's why we turned up into William Street. By this time, it's a little long parade, going downhill. So from College Street, you're looking down upon the parade. In a sense, you can, since it goes downhill, or when you got to the bottom, you could look up. But I was still well back, very well back, and everybody. There was a lot of chatter about what is going on. What have they changed? Why have they changed the route of the parade? Why do they want to do this? This is just sort of great ignorance in the general crowd, as far as I could tell, and I'm not sure that anybody anywhere knew what was going on.
What was the original? Sorry,
to end it. The original route was to go down and simply go into Hyde Park and disperse.
Was there a permit?
There was a permit. Well, we all understood there was a permit. Yeah.
And before I interrupted you, you were talking about William Street.
Just that it was really weird, because it, you know, because of what happened, when we get to the top of the hill, it sort of feels as though there's a sort of mad determination by 800 or 1,000 people, whatever it was, to have some great confrontation. But that wasn't what it was like at all. It was 800 or 1,000 people wondering, oh, you know, they've extended the parade route, oh, this is still fun, you know. But of course, they lost the music systems and so forth, so everybody just sort of plodding along. William Street's dead, you know, apart from being a major traffic thoroughfare. It's got nobody on the sidewalks, so we're not making any declaration to a soul. And in those days, there wasn't even accommodation along the sides. There's just this big lot wide road, 1,000 people sort of wandering up.
So when you went down William Street, were people walking, running?
No, just walking.
And then you went to Darlinghurst Road?
Yeah.
And you walked in the direction to the Alamein Fountain?
Yep, turned left.
And what was the atmosphere like there?
Well, what became clear was, as we approached King's Cross, is that there were huge numbers of police assembling. There were police cars, traffic was being diverted. There were endless sirens wailing as we went all the way up it's a long way from College Street to Darlinghurst if you're just walking. They're not running. So this was scary, and we thought, well, if they want us to go left, they must just want us to disband in there, as we should have done back at Hyde Park. But it was very scary because it felt as well. The noise, the sirens represented, the sound represented whether there were a lot of police or few. It was a big noise and it was endless.
Did the police surround you? Did you have a way out?
Well, no, there was no way out. No, there was no way out.
And were the police, did people give any warnings to disperse or anything that you remember?
No, not that I remember.
Were you nervous?
I was, this is really weird. I was terrified of being seen, but it was night and pretty chaotic, even without the police intervention. So no, I wasn't nervous at that stage. I mean, I was scared in the way one's scared that something ugly might be about to happen, which you saw police taking their numbers and names off, and you knew what that meant.
Did you see the police assaulting anybody physically?
Yes. But my recollection is fuzzy. I can remember police grabbing people whose faces I'd sometimes recognise, you know, throwing them into paddy wagons or dragging them out back towards William Street.
Do you remember the police using their batons or their fists or?
No, which it was, I don't remember.
But you do remember?
Because it was all too, you know, one was trying to save oneself or not get, trying to not get beaten.
Were you okay though?
Yes, I somehow, you know, I think, I wish I could remember what I was wearing, but I think it was, you know, casual conservative, and that I might have got away with just being a passerby, innocent bystander.
Because I understand some people came out of the bars in King's Cross.
They did, yes.
So at this point it wasn't just lesbians, gays, bisexuals, transgender.
No,
it was
straights
as well.
Yes, but that, I think that made quite a difference because it's hard to know how many people might have come out, but a lot came out. It wasn't like going down Oxford Street where you were sort of begging them to come out of the bars. In King's Cross, these are people who are really interested in a stoush or anything that's going on. You know, you go to King's Cross for a wild night, or you did there, and there was something wild happening. And the thing is that of the 1,000, let's say of the 1,000 lesbians and gays, this wasn't a big drug-taking era, and at 10 o'clock at night there was not much. I'd say that 1,000 people basically were neither drunk nor drugged up. I'm sure there must have been somebody there who had a couple of drinks, but it was actually an ordinary sober crowd, because if they were drinking and drugs, that was afterwards. That was, we'll do the break, then we'll go and have a drink. But the people who joined King's Cross, a lot of them were it's pretty drunk, and
they were rowdy
and rowdy, and amongst them were people who thought it'd be great to have a fight with the police.
I mentioned a lot of people who came out of the bars in King's Cross were straight. Should I presume then some of the people who joined the parade at Taylor Square could well have been straight as well and were allies of the community? Do you know?
No, I don't know. No.
And
No, but there could have been, yeah.
And at what point did the police themselves disperse, do you remember, from King's Cross and leave you all alone?
I got out by going down, managing to go down the street that leads down to Elizabeth Bay. I can't think what it is now. But, and so I wasn't at all interested in coming back and confronting the police, so I don't know the answer to that.
So you got out.
I subsequently went to got out and went to Darlinghurst police station.
That's where you went.
Because I met other people.
And there were crowds of people there?
There were a lot of people there, maybe a couple of hundred.
And how were you feeling after this? Were you in shock? Were you angry? Were you feeling empowered, disempowered?
I was very upset. What's upset mean? Yes, I remember that I was angry and worried, which is a different sort of category of experience, and still scared.
So you were out.
I'm afraid I have to go back to that and admit that, because I can do that now. I'm laughing, but at the time it wasn't fun.
So you were scared.
Yeah,
You were upset.
Yeah, so that's why I keep mentioning it. It wasn't fun, it was real.
And there were
the scaredness.
There were crowds outside Darlinghurst Police Station.
Yes.
What was the atmosphere like there among the crowds?
Well, that was all relentless planning. Can we raise bail? Where can we find money? Who do we know that, apart from ourselves, who do we know that might be able to turn up money right now in the middle of, or in the early hours of the morning, I suppose it is. Where could we find more solicitors? Where could we find barristers? It was for what had happened to those 200 people, it was sound thinking and strategic planning.
The arrest, there were what, about 53 arrests?
Yes, and as we subsequently found out. Yes.
And some of those had been assaulted. I think Peter Murphy, who spoke quite
Peter
a bit.
Murphy, who I wasn't going to spend the night with
No,
by this stage.
He was badly injured, wasn't he?
Very badly injured.
And I understand from a couple of people I've interviewed who were arrested that they could hear the crowd chanting.
Yes.
Do you remember any of those chants?
No, I don't.
What sort of time in the morning? You mentioned that people were
Yes.
there. What sort of time would it have been?
Look, it feels as though it was 2 a.m., but I have no idea.
And you
what
say
do
it was-
people say it is? What do other people say? I'm
that.
interested myself.
Around that.
It seems to have been a long, long time.
And you reckon it was about 200 people outside?
Yeah, that's what I would have guessed, yes.
And did anybody get bail money?
Yes, but who, where, what and why, I don't remember. I remember I had some money, but everybody who had money put in, but we needed...
Because there were no ATMs, were there? And
No.
banks wouldn't have been open.
So there were some good efforts to think of some people who might have £1,000 or dollars or whatever
And
they were.
how long did you stay outside Darlinghurst police station?
Seemed like a long time, because I remember getting to a point where where a lot of people were just sort of sitting on the pavement, because after all, they've been on their feet relentlessly since well, probably 9 o'clock, certainly 10 o'clock, and
Do you remember the media reports?
oh yes, of course.
I think the Sydney Morning Herald, it printed the names,
Yes, of
occupations,
people,
ages and various
Yes.
other details.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the apology that has since happened from the Sydney Morning Herald at Fairfax?
There hasn't been an apology for it. There hasn't been an apology. There's been attempts to walk around it, but it was a scurrilous act at the time. Absolutely scurrilous and horrifying.
How do you feel about the recent parliamentary apology?
Well, we didn't go up for it. I feel okay, but not. I was wildly enthusiastic about it, and I am one of those who thinks that the inability of the minister to direct the Commissioner of Police to offer an apology on behalf of the police tended to make something of a sham of the parliamentary policy.
Which brings me to my next question. We had a police apology.
A sort of police policy.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it's nice to see that somebody's trying, but it's not actually happened in the way that a true police apology would.
When
And there are many of those cops who were involved there are still as anti-gay as they were back then.
And when the people were arrested, I think it was around 53, did they have any endorsements from well-known people at the time supporting them, actors, politicians even?
I don't recall any. There might have been, but it didn't sort of. It's certainly not part of my remembering.
The charges were dropped, weren't they, I think?
Oh, I think everything, yes, eventually. Or they were not pursued. The status of the charges, I'm not exactly sure. They might not have been pursued, but still left in existence in a
When
clever way.
that first parade took place and you saw the violence and the arrests, did you have any idea that that first evening would bring about what we have today as
No,
a
of
city
course
again?
not.
None at all.
No, it felt as though somehow or other we'd been bashed into submission now, but that's what it felt like to me at the time.
You worked at the ABC.
Yeah.
What was the attitude at the ABC like?
That this was an appalling thing to happen. I mean, yes, among journalists and program makers generally, but yeah, that was the attitude.
When we look at the Mardi Gras today, one of the big issues is always equality, such as marriage equality.
Yeah.
Back then, a lot of it was about gay liberation.
Yes.
Do you think equality and liberation can work hand in hand, or are they contradictions?
I think there might be contradictions, but time will tell on that one. the parade seems to have lost an awful lot of its irony, of its sarcasm, of its idiocy, in favour of sort of groups of people declaring we're for this or we're for that. But from the second and third parades on, there was always an awful lot of sticking it to authority, and you don't get that quite the same way anymore.
So what advice would you give to the organisers of the parade in order to improve it?
To look for people who want to bring a bold irony back into some of the floats. It's not that the other things shouldn't happen, but being gay isn't all about being in a group and being sexy. It's part, but it's not. That's only the beginning.
How do you feel when you see the police marching?
Oh, I like that. I like that. Yeah.
What advice do you have for the young activists of today?
That's a hard one. I should have realised you were going to ask something like that. I suppose all I'd say is sort of try to act on a broad front, not just specific issues, even though the specific issue may be the driving point, but it's got to be wider beyond that point, even with that point achieved.
What are your hopes for the future?
Oh, I hope I'll find a really hot guy.
Don't we all?
Who just adores older men. That's what I'm hoping.
And a couple more questions. What advice would you give to your younger self back in 1978?
No, I'm happy with what the younger self did to try and deal with the issues as I've explained.
And finally, do you think we've learnt many valuable lessons from that first Mardi Gras?
It gave me an undying courage around these issues, and while at my present age I don't do all that much about it, for most of my life I have subsequently been very active on a wide range of gay issues and lesbian issues too.
Vaughan, thank you very much.
Thanks, William.